inflation has come again, and it's not fun. So without further ado, let's get into energy. I'm going to let our good friend Nate Dallin take the lead because he wanted it to be energy. So go ahead, sir.
Okay, guys, energy is real important. And the reason this was on my mind is I was just on vacation. I was in 5 different states, 2,400 miles of travel. It was just great times. It was just great times. Rural Idaho to sort of a swanky island off the coast of South Carolina. And so I saw a lot of people. And strangers were stopping me to talk about gas prices. So like if you go to a gas station, people just want to talk about how frustrating and upsetting and they don't know what to do. One guy was like, I literally don't know how much I'm going to have to raise my prices on my customers because this is just getting so out of hand. And so it just struck me that this is like, I'm about to say something that makes people on the Twitter box very upset, but I didn't hear one thing about the January 6th committees. Didn't hear one thing about that. I mean, it turns out most Americans don't think that we're on the precipice of an authoritarian regime from the Trump people. Like, that's not, I don't think that's registering with folks. I think they're registering with prices are ridiculously high.
But Nate, I got a question. If you give a client advice publicly and then they act in contradiction to that advice, or then they instruct you and you act in contradiction to that advice, what can we say about your client?
Well, see, this is the, I mean, it's just tough. And anyway, this is such a big deal. I think that the political ramifications are going to be shocking. I think that there's going to be some shocking stuff to this. And so I just wanted to talk through, I sort of jokingly said we're going to talk about energy. And I thought the forecast, like what do we think the rest of the year will be? We're here in June. We got 6 months left of this fine year, 2022. What's that going to look like? What are the political ramifications of that is my second point on energy. And then I can't remember what my third one was. But anyway, those were my 2 big ones. I figured we never get to the third point anyway. So if we just talk about the first 2, we can kind of talk through that. So that's really what caused this. I was just shocked that this is what strangers are talking to strangers about, and that to me is a soft but important indicator. So that's why I want to talk about this, and I sort of kicked out, and I don't think I got Captain Latte over here to take a look at this, but there's a little bit of chatter today on some of the people I follow on the Twitter box. Trying to figure out what exactly is causing a lot of these problems. So one guy that I follow, his name is Art Berman. He's a geologist by training, but he happens to run a blog trying to watch energy markets. And so he's really on the supply side. And he brought up some work done by a guy named Jeff Curry for Bloomberg, where he just said, the Saudis cannot make up the crude deficit long term. That's a huge problem. And then the same guy, Jeff Curry, said even if they could, we have a manufacturing and a finished products problem, meaning we're not refining the stuff at the pace that we need to keep up with demand. And he called this the old economy problem. He said that the investment environment really for the last 30 years has been sort of goofy, where people did not want to go into capital-heavy projects. When I say people, I mean investors did not want to go into capital-heavy projects. Instead, they wanted low-capital, high-growth, kind of techie type stuff that didn't require as much upfront capital. And as a consequence of that, we didn't invest in sort of the boring, slow-go, but really critical to the economy pieces. And he said oil is at the top and refinery production. 2 is just minerals. He's like, if you want to do EV cars, you need way better mining, right? Like we have a crunch in being able to get the materials we're going to need and keep things affordable on the EV front. And then finally, he said that some of the ESG political stuff has had an effect, although he thinks that that's been pretty low on the list. And he said, because of that, we're just not investing inside of the areas that we need to. And he did mention, too, that even ag has suffered from this a little bit as well. People don't want to invest a whole bunch in, like, corn that hasn't attracted a ton of capital over the last 20 years. We could ask Ty about how corn's doing. But anyway, so I thought that was an interesting place to start. I think Sam might have a slightly different perspective, at least in the short term. And of course, Captain Latte is going to teach us the ways to get out of this mess. That's really why we needed you today, man.
I hope I have an answer.
Yeah. But anyway, that's just my takes. Those are some of my initial takes. If we want to talk about what does the rest of the year look like, and then what the political ramifications are, that's what I propose.
Awesome. I'm gonna have to look up Art Burnham but in terms of oil, I don't know a giant amount of oil, but I'm old, and so I remember history. I remember when we had the great manipulation of the market from all these institutional investors getting into oil futures, and that was a load of garbage, and that definitely hurt the consumer pocketbook. I also, I remember reading about the oil embargoes, and I also remember the fracking revolution and how America effectively broke the Saudi investment. So what's different now? Is it that consumers have listened to the foreign agents that are telling us that fracking is horrible and it's going to destroy everything in our environment? And so we're slowing down our extraction. We have more trouble opening new leases. And now it is a Democratic president, a Democratic executive. And so there's at least the perception that it's harder to acquire new leases in America. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. Joe Biden said he was not going to end fracking. So I don't know why that would be reality. As an environmentalist, I'm a little sketchy on fracking. It means that we're putting a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere, but it's not as bad as coal. And so I'm a little cool on this. Like, if we have a glut of oil coming out of American wells, that will drive down the price of natural gas. And what does that mean? That means that American ports are going to be taking compressed natural gas and liquefied natural gas and exporting it in order to keep that price high. So if you were investing right now, that's what I would be putting your money in CNG and LNG startups. No joke about it. We have a LNG tank here in Tacoma that I protested against. They promised it would not be used for export. They're going to break that promise. You know it. So yeah, energy is tough, and also economy is tough. And this is the marriage of energy problems with economic problems, because we've cut the world into fifths, and we've basically tried to cut out Russia from our economy. And as Germany showed us, that's not possible. And I tweeted something this morning like, oh, why is the ruble so high? I can't believe that our embargoes failed. Well, it's because Germany gave Russia $8 billion. They are addicted to Russian gas, partly because of their turn away from nuclear, but for other reasons. They're turning away from coal, which is a good thing, but they also shut down the nuclear. So yes, they need energy. They have an economy, the economy where they produce most of their local housewares, in fact, most of their local, everything that consumers buy in Germany, so much of it is locally produced. And that's amazing, but it means that they need a strong economy day in and day out. And where in America, we can kind of skate by on our gigantic materials imports from China and from other places in the world. And Germany, that might not be the case. And so they had a syncretic trade relationship with Russia. They were literally unable to enact these trade embargoes that the rest of the world is begging us for. And this is the result, is that Russia becomes richer, Russian oil, gas, etc. keeps flowing. I mean, I could go on for a while, but I want to hear from Nate. Sam, sorry.
Nate, did you have something you want to say? I'm not certain that Russian oil will keep flowing. I mean, it'll come to maybe to Germany, but they're not going to unless the United States, I think it's really up to the United States. And if we decide to instruct NATO to stop the embargoes, to basically just give up, that will allow Russia. But from what I know, everything you've said has tracked in my knowledge up to this point. But from what I know, this is something I learned from Zion. Because the Russian oil wells are in permafrost, if they stop using them for a little bit, the pipes explode, which means that any interruption in flow and demand from them, not just Germany, but literally anything, right? Like the whole France, Scandinavia, Poland, whatever, anybody else. It doesn't matter if Germany stays. All of Europe has to stay involved in order for them not to have a major catastrophic event that literally takes their entire system offline for good. They'll have to drill new wells in order to access that same oil in the future. They can't just reactivate.
Is that very difficult?
I think it's capital intensive, like Nate was talking about.
Yeah, I think it's just a money issue.
Right. So the question is, do the wells get drilled while Russia is intact and in control of their oil wells, or does it happen after Russia is crushed and is no longer a country, a functional state, and Poland and Germany and Sweden are like annexing parts of what used to be Russia in order to access their wells? That's the question.
Escalated real quick there at the end, Sam.
This is great. I mean, if I was 100% blue MAGA, I would be all over this. I'm a little more independent. I love the idea that the invasion of Ukraine is a giant
They're out of people.
Yeah,
the Russians are out of people. They're not going to be
like this idea.
A country.
I love this
years.
idea. I hope it's true. I really do.
It's inevitable. I mean, it's not about. I mean, the reason why they're at war right now is because they sense their impending doom. So it's not really relevant. Russia could come out looking like a huge winner here in Ukraine, and it still wouldn't stop them from ceasing to exist as a country in a couple of decades. It's not really relevant long term, is what I'm saying. Especially since they've lost all their troops.
This is getting into like history of Russia through the 90s to modern day, and I know that we could go way down in the rabbit hole, but yeah. So Putin did a bad thing, and it may be an existential failure level bad.
Not acting would have been an existential failure. And also he acted and it still was an existential failure, right? Like he couldn't stop the existential failure from executing on itself.
Yeah, I would love to drill down in like how Russia could have survived and competed. I mean, I literally work I used to until recently because of the war. I work with developers in the CIS region. It was, I guess I should say, a growing economy, a modernizing economy. But now, I don't know that this is on paper, it's a definite improvement, and we see that in the strength of the ruble right now. I don't know that. Some people have hypothesized that Russia is going to pivot and trade exclusively with like Iran and China, and maybe that's one of the ideas. They can't
even get the oil. How are they going to get it?
Right.
They have no way to.
You're talking about delivery, right?
Exactly. There's no physical way to get the oil from where it sits in Russia to China.
Well, to quote my father-in-law, with enough money and enough time, engineers could figure that out. But where are they?
Yeah, but they don't have the money or the time because China's collapsing even faster than Russia demographically, right? Like China is like, according to demographics, China, the Han ethnicity of China is going to cease to exist by the end of this century. Like they are in population collapse. They don't have children anymore.
Well, I mean, isn't that by design? That's by design.
Yes, but that turns out to be a really bad strategy for national power.
Of course, yeah.
China said.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Latte. Just to point this out, because I spit to my wife this idea.
No. Let's think about this. When did the one child per household policy end? And when people soy out about Xinjiang, I bring this up. When did that policy end? And it was within the last 10 years. So you are going to see the lost generation of men marrying very young. That's a little bleak. Mm-hmm. Right. So, just the women. Well, well, come on. These are two distinct problems. You can't blame everything on communism as much as you might like to. Yes. Yeah. And it is the problem that's always happened with with the technocratic Chinese state is there's a bunch of smart guys and they move very quickly and rashly to make decisions that kill all the sparrows or drive their their rural people to make low quality fraudulent iron and it results in disastrous systemic collapses. And as much of a socialist as I am, I know that if you apply a very heavy lever to economies, you have unpredictable results. And that's what we're seeing now.
There's a lot of problems going on. Demographics, the big D. Sam is all about demographics. Latte. This
I'm actually all about geography, and demographics is a close second. But
that's right. And so now this issue. So getting back to these issues, to my way of thinking, the way that I conceive of the energy problem right now, and actually, Latte, maybe you can help me out with this. Is how much? If we just looked at like the world fossil fuel pie. Well, actually, let's be more specific. Or more generic. Let's just look at all energy consumption outside of like human caloric intake. Like I don't need you to count how many calories I just ate for dinner and see how many joules of energy I generated. But it just what we would consider normal industrialized fuel usages is 60% of the world market still dominated by oil, like 35% coal, and then like everything else is the nuclear and the
yes.
and renewables, etc. So it's sort of like a 60-30-10 split or something like that. Is that about right, or is that wrong?
That is actually right. And the number one source for authoritative data on this, you go to the BP Statistical Review of Energy. BP's done some really horrible shit with their fossil fuels, and so we made them pay. We made them invest in like all of these public works, like the Review of Energy, and so they have all this wonderful data, and they release the report every year. So yeah, basically,
it's their penance for ruining the world.
To speak to you about a new organization,
right. And my cat
the
just
Eco-Modernist
won't
Society
quit
of North America.
touching.
I'm here because we are in the midst of a potentially monumental.
He just switched my
Terms of
scenes on me. Sorry.
It is only through.
No, well, I'll just keep going with this point. So, in a world where 60% is still sort of on the backs of the oil and gas universe, even if we kind of went really hard and tried to eliminate coal entirely, which would be a huge boon for the CO2 world, right? Getting CO2 emissions down. That would be, that'd be game changing if we could just get that 30% of coal gonzo. That'd be huge.
Yeah.
But in a universe where 60% of our fuel or our energy is still coming from nat gas and petroleum products of some sort, like, to me, that just sounds like a very fragile system, right? It wouldn't take much of a disruption in that area or that neck of the woods where we would immediately start to see ramifications inside the broader economy. And that, so I would just, mention, like, when people talk about green solutions, the green solutions, as far as I'm aware, and hopefully you all can give me some hope on this, like, that'll help us eliminate all the coal stuff, right? But then we would have to, but actually starting to eliminate the gas side of the equation is much more complicated, and we're going to need, like, tons of batteries, you know what I mean? Like, there's just not an easy path out of this particular problem in disruptions in petroleum.
No, especially since gas is so cheap.
Disruptions in coal we might be able to handle, right? And actually, we'd probably be better off as the human species if there were disruptions to coal. But having disruptions to oil and gas, we just don't have a lot of tools in the belt to deal with this, right? Or am I seeing this incorrectly?
No, you're basically right. And it's worse when we get to gas. Gas is almost as fragile as electricity. You cannot store natural gas outside of compressed or liquefied natural gas. You build it up in the pipeline, and there's a little bit of flex in the pipeline. Maybe if you're lucky, you've got an LNG tanker. That's why the gas company local to me really wanted that tanker, because they want to maximize those investments. They want to have a bigger buffer, and they're going to use the excuse that they could fuel up some ships and phase out the bunker fuel to do that. And so, but basically, oil is somewhat flexible. We have a petroleum reserve for exactly this case, because it's flexible, because, as you said, Nate, we could have huge supply problems where the tap just gets shut off on us, like OPEC did back in the late 70s. And so mid 70s, I'm not that old. And coal is, of course, the easiest energy source to use. You literally pick it up off the ground and put it on your back if you live in Africa. I have photos I could dig up of people literally doing this. They will get coal right off the ground where they have found a surface vein, and they'll use that to power their lives. And so if you want to see the world returning to coal, you will fragilize the energy grid, because people will use whatever they can get, and that'll be coal, that'll be biofuel, as not the good kind of biofuel, the bad kind, the burning wood and dung and garbage, which literally kills people. We have 8 million people a year die from particulate matter, and
that garbage. Yeah.
3/4 of that is from biomass, from burning garbage, dung, and other bad stuff. So fragilizing the grid, extremely bad. The best thing that we could ever do, electrify every hydroelectric, every hydro dam that we have in America. Got to electrify it. That might double our hydro electricity output, and it will create some buffers in our energy system. Not enough to do seasonal even. There is nowhere in the world other than maybe Switzerland, and Switzerland can only do seasonal storage for themselves. There may be Scandinavia, and they can only do enough seasonal storage for their local communities. Nowhere in the world is any storage up to the task. You can't even do it with hydrogen, because guess what? Hydrogen is the smallest molecule on that periodic table. Whether or not you think it's arbitrary, it's the smallest little atom there is, and it makes up the smallest molecule. You have a huge problem containing it. Maybe there's a magical technology outside that will solve this, but if you try to make and store hydrogen, it will leak. Not only do you lose 60% of the energy when you make it, but it leaks constantly. And then we get to batteries. The problem with batteries is density. You cannot compare any other kind of storage with batteries, because batteries turn out to be like this much. You get 300 watt hours per kilogram with a battery. It's dozens of times more with gasoline. That's really the scale of that's the proportions that we're talking about. I actually had a really popular response to one of those engagement questions. Density. Here's the density math. A battery today holds 300 watt hours per kilogram. Future batteries, my best bet, less than 2 kilowatt hours per kilogram. Burning lithium, a chemist told me this. Burning lithium, 7 kilowatt hours per kilogram. We're never going to burn lithium for energy. Don't worry about it. It's just a hypothetical to say, oh, well, batteries could just get so much more energy. No, they can't. It's impossible, because that's your upper limit. 7 kilowatt hours.
Physics.
Yeah,
Stupid
it is physics. It's physics. So gasoline, 13 kilowatt hours per kilogram.
Gosh,
that's the standard. And as you said, that's still fragile. So
right.
What's next? Here it is.
Nuclear.
Yes, nuclear. Absolutely. There was a recent report that said, oh my God, SMRs, they produce so much nuclear waste. Oh my, it's going to end the planet. So much waste. About 9 times worse than modern reactors. Well, I did the math. That is 133,000 kilowatt hours per kilogram.
Yeah.
That is the very worst energy conversion from uranium to electricity. Standard reactors, standard gigawatt scale reactors, have a burnup of about 50 megawatt days per kilogram. That comes out to be 1.2 million kilowatt hours per kilogram. And then if we get into breeder reactors, all the thorium bros, listen up, that is 21.6 million kilowatt hours per kilogram. Now, what's my prescription? We've got to build 4 of these every month between now and 2050. That means we start now, every month. June, 4 new. July, 4 new. August, September, October. Doesn't matter how long they take. It's going to take less than 30 years, all of them. So they'll all be done, or all of them will be done by 2070, right?
Just far too sensible. This will never happen.
Just keep building them. Just build 4 a month, all the time. Keep starting 4 new reactors. That's it. And that's still not going to be enough to solve our energy needs. So unfortunately, we're going to have to keep burning stuff until all of this takes over. If you love renewables, guess what? That prescription only gets us to 25% of our global energy demand. That's a huge nuclear build out, and it's only 25%. So if you love wind and solar, go as fast as possible, because if we have 25% of all of our energy coming from nuclear, we will not be fragilized. We will not fall over at the slightest gust, or lack of gust, I should say, because we always have that base load, 25% nuclear. We'll have thermal storage. We'll have, gravity batteries. We'll have even electrical batteries will work on very short intervals, very short frequencies. And that'll be enough. If we put all of this together, we can do it. I'm confident that we can end fossil fuel use sometime shortly after my lifetime. And my daughter's life is really depending on it. I don't mean to be catastrophist about it, but the quality of her life.
Right place if you want to talk catastrophes, we're all in on that.
The quality of her life really depends on it, and I want her the quality of my children's lives to be as good as mine. And it's not going to happen if we just keep trucking along the way we've been going.
Okay, well that was beautiful. Sam, before we get to you, because I want to ask you some specific questions. I want to ask Captain Latte a few more here. So, question number one is, what is let's go with the top two things that are stopping us as a society in the United States. We'll just keep it here. In the U.S., what are the two major issues stopping us from expanding nuclear into the country? Is it investment money and a regulation issue? I just don't know what the issues are.
State Democratic parties and regulation.
Okay. So do you get a sense, I just want to follow up on that before you dive into those, because do you get a sense then that if some of the political issues were off the table, that the private sector would engage and things would be pretty good? Or do you think the capital up front is just too much, it's too risky, it's too weird, the market just doesn't like it, and there needs to be some government or state-initiated investment? What's your take on some of those points?
I think that it is more of the tail wagging the dog, unfortunately. I know people like Simon Irish of TerraPower up in Canada. No, sorry, that's Terrestrial Energy in Canada. Simon Irish says, if you build it, business will come. And that's a wonderful, optimistic philosophy, especially if you're a business person. But I think that constituencies have made for a fragile and unreliable regulator in the U.S. We have things like how we treat radiation, how we treat nuclear waste, how we treat safety and security of nuclear facilities. That is completely different for nuclear energy than any other technology, even other nuclear technologies. So we're talking about nuclear medicine. I had an accident. May 3rd, 2019. We had a cesium source leak less than 2 miles that way, right next to where I live. That sounds pretty serious, doesn't it? Oh, but it's not an energy-producing facility. It was a medical research device. And so, call the fire department, they clean it up, it's fine. No one's going to talk about the first hill downwinders 20 years from now. They're not. No one made a big deal about it. There's no cover-up. It's legitimately not a big deal. But yet, here in the Seattle's 3rd City Council District, and in the 7th Congressional District, both of the politicians elected to fill those positions are anti-nuclear. And neither of them have said a thing about the Harborview cesium source accident. So, this is basically the propaganda of Ralph Nader and the Green Party has created a fragile regulator and a very shy and anti-nuclear constituency. Those are two. And then third, I'll say, as my friend Jim Conca says, nuclear has no constituency. It has no place in America where the economy is really buoyed by nuclear energy. It has no representative, no senators that are completely energized to keep nuclear on the table, to expand our nuclear energy industry, to make it going. We have a lot of people who are excited about cleaning up waste, and that problem's never going to end, So, no matter how much you think you've cleaned it up, this nervous constituency is going to make you keep cleaning it up. Scrub harder, out, damn spot, out. And it just, nothing is good enough for them. So they have a job forever. And when it comes to anything else, any other nuclear technology, well, it's just not a big deal. And it doesn't have to, show the same receipts as nuclear energy does, unfortunately. So if we could have a nuclear constituency, if we could have, the eastern half of Washington state be a place where the nuclear renaissance, the nuclear fission renaissance happens. If we could have the western half of Washington state be the place where the fission renaissance is, cross your fingers, about to happen. If we had Wyoming, where building nuclear plants was suddenly fashionable, and we went from having one that's going to finish in 2028 to like 8 that are going to finish in 2030.
How did they do that? Like, just getting to brass tacks, did the local government sort of encourage and push this stuff, or like what was the mechanism for that?
Oh, for Wyoming?
Yeah.
This was a business deal. This was straight up Bill Gates Intellectual Ventures worked on nuclear as a technology for over 10 years. And they kept saying, okay, we're going to keep doing it. We're going to figure out when it's time, we're going to be ready. And then they talked to Pacificor. Sorry, what's his name? Big business guy. My mind's blanking. Owner of Pacificor met with Bill Gates, and right as we failed to pass a tax deferral, not a holiday, not anything, not a discount, not anything like that, just a deferral. We failed to pay pass a tax deferral in Washington state to bring the TerraPower reactor to the Richland site, to Washington Power 1 or 4. That failed, and so he was looking for other venues. I bet. I don't have any inside knowledge, though I conceivably could, but this is my understanding what's happening and the politics around it is that, okay, we're going to keep looking. And they found it. They found Pacificor, who's retiring a bunch, like 4, 5, 6 coal plants, and they need that baseload energy. Right now, they are collecting a huge amount of power transfer fees from the windmills in the Dakotas down to Las Vegas and California. That's called a transfer fee when you are providing grid services, because guess what? Electricity is a field, and if you are geographically in the middle of wind power and a giant load on the grid, if you serve that function, you get paid. It's called a transfer fee. Right now, coal plants, the remaining coal plants that everyone says, oh, these are stranded assets, they're upside down. No, they're getting money from transfer fees. They are stabilizing the grid. They're allowing energy to flow from one end, where there's a wind power constituency, to the other end, where, oh, guess what? There's a lot of companies like Google, Facebook, who say, oh, we're 100% wind powered. Well, or 100% renewable powered. Well, technically you're coal powered, and then everyone who lives around the wind is wind powered, but close enough. We credit you for the wind. It is we have a green up program in Seattle, very similar, where you can pay $5 or $10 or something like that to offset any carbon that would creep into your electric bill.
Right.
And it is it's a green indulgence. It is a virtue signal. I'm sorry to say that you're promising that you're clean.
We should go back to that system. I'd prefer to just pay for my salvation. Way easier. Hey, Sam. So the next thing then is, how do you see this these elevated gas and nat gas prices affecting the politics of the United States going into November?
Yeah, I would say it puts a lot of pressure on people. And I don't really know what's going to happen, but something is going to happen, I feel very certain, to resolve this. When I say resolve, I mean to allow some pressure to be released before the election. And I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know whether Biden's going to put pressure on Ukraine to give in to Russia and just let it happen. And then like abandon the sanctions regime against Russia, and in order to like ruin the United States' credibility on the international stage, but solve his political problem for the short term, or whether Biden is going to just halt all international trade of U.S. produced oil and gas to just sever the the United States from the rest of the world, which would
I
have
saw a
function.
tweet saying that the Biden people in the White House had started having those conversations today.
Right, and that would functionally do the same thing as what I just described, because without the United States oil and gas contributions, all of our European allies would have to just go back to Russia.
Yeah.
So it may be both.
Well, okay.
But-
next week,
but-
Biden is going to Saudi Arabia, hoping to get another 2 million barrels a day, right?
Well, and this week, he and other Western leaders met with Zelensky.
Oh. So to my way of thinking, that means we're like break glass situation, right? I mean, this is.
I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but it doesn't really matter what the news is. I think that you can sort of predict the flows of these things, and something is going to happen, and it doesn't even really have to make a real impact on the actual fundamentals of you. You had been talking, Nate, about somebody who made a back of envelope math calculation that showed that we're screwed on the deficit. So I don't know that any of the measures that we're talking about would make any actual contribution to stopping that. But what I am fairly certain about, just looking at how everything's working out, is that in the short term, the government or some actors in the U.S. government are going to take some kind of actions that are so drastic that it shapes short-term opinion of the markets, and the reason why I can tell that is because the Biden administration has been under pressure for so long, and we're due for a Biden comeback narrative because he hasn't had one yet, and I don't know. I don't think that Biden comeback narrative is going to save the Democrats in the election at all. It's going to have zero factual impact on anything, in my opinion. But it'll be something the press will talk about, and it'll be accompanied by gas prices coming down in the United States.
And when you say gas prices coming down, I think we had mentioned this before.
From their current levels, not all the way to where they were before the 2020 price shocks started. And the reason why I can tell that's going to happen, beyond the like incredible need for a Biden comeback narrative that has to be written at some point before this election, the same way that Trump comeback narratives were written by the Republican press ahead of the Trump election in 2024 or 2020, I think. That has to be written at some point, and no one's pulled the trigger on it yet. So they're waiting for something. And what I'm seeing, and so the what gets written and how and when and why is really not important. But those things all happen because of markets and their movements. And I just want to share. I want to share my screen, if that's okay with you all, really quickly here. Boom. Can you all see what I'm looking at?
Yes.
All right, so let's take a look at the 2-year yield. This is the yield on U.S. Treasury bonds. And hold on, let's go way back. All right, can you all see this? Can you see what I'm looking at right here? This is the yield on the 2-year government U.S. Treasury bond. And this is the period right here where I think that Biden's fortune started to turn. Before June of 2021, Biden was riding high. Joe Manchin was ready to vote for any number of government spending bills. And here's where things started to really fall apart. And they really accelerated here. And you could just chart the downturn in Biden approval ratings on this chart right here. Boom, 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 boom. And here we go. This is now, we're in April of this year. And it looked like things were perhaps going to cool off. And in fact, we did a stream about this, about how excited I was about this decline here. But then, just in the last month, maybe 3 weeks even, boom, boom, and we spiked all the way up to here. Now, what's happened in the last 2 days? We're back down.
Even though Fed raised rates, it still went down.
Well, not even though. Perhaps because the Fed raised rates. And let me just. I just think that it coincided, and there's a reason why it coincided. I don't think it necessarily is a causal relationship. But let me just show you. So this is happening right now on the 2-year yield, and the same thing, by the way, in other government bonds, right? 10-year yield I could show you right here. It's the same basic pattern. Look what's happening in oil. All right. Here's where Biden starts to have trouble. Up, and here's a higher high, and here's a higher high, and spike. Bam! That's where the stock market starts to go to hell. Right? This is where the stock market starts to go to hell. And it's been moving around, and here we are. This is the last month. This is this brutal sell-off we've seen. And the last 2 days, we've fallen out of this pattern, and it looks like we're headed down. Not down to 68 dollars a barrel, but probably down to here.
Is that your line?
Around 100, and it may be a while before we make another swing back up. Even toward the end of the year.
1 quarter.
Yeah, a while could be the end of the year. I think it could be a while, and the reason why it's a while is possibly because of stagflation, because people aren't going to be using oil.
Which means people will be pissed.
Yes, people will be pissed. And I'm not, again, that's why I'm saying that this isn't going to help the Democrats. I'm saying that people are going to remain to be pissed, but it's the wheels will not fall off the system. They're not falling off right now. And we may end up with Democrats losing 50 seats instead of 80. Right, because of this.
So let me summarize what I'm seeing. This chart is the yield on Treasury bonds. Is that because people are exiting the market and putting their money in bonds?
No, it's because and Nate, you actually have a lot of expertise here too, so you should feel free to introduce your opinion here. But it's because people are selling bonds in order to send a message to the Fed that they need to be raising rates, right? It's like a FU to the Fed saying, we expect you to raise rates to whatever the rates are at. That's the expectation that they're setting for the Fed, saying, we expect you to raise rates to here. So right now, the expectation is that the Fed is going to raise rates to 3.1. Why is it exactly the same level?
Right,
it's
they're saying
that's the level at which you can make a profit if the Fed is raising rates to that level. Does that make sense?
Sort of. We'd rather have cash than the government bond because it's not paying us enough.
Yes, and also they think that cash should be more expensive to get because they're saying that there's too much stuff floating around. There's too much liquidity, and it needs to exit in order to bring things under control. And the reason why the Federal Reserve has not raised, they were talking a big game about raising rates, but they didn't actually start doing it until quarter 1 of this year. And the reason why is because they were dealing with a lot of internal political problems and an internal fight over the direction of the future of the Fed. And so we haven't been in this kind of situation since 1994, where with usually the Fed and the bond market yields move in tandem, where if the Fed moves, then the bond markets will move. And if the bond markets start to move, then the Fed will react and move, right? And they sort of like keep tabs on each other and they follow each other really closely. It's very rare that one gets ahead of the other. And right now, it's the reason why I'm saying they're setting an expectation is because they're so far ahead of the Fed here. They're setting an expectation that the Fed is going to get to this point. And what I'm saying is that we're not going to have a real anything. Nothing is really going to change in like a negative way until the Fed policy and the expectation meet. And that's going to be the real decision point where the Fed's going to decide, do we keep going up or do we start to relax policy? And the reason why is if they keep going up past the expectation that the market set for them. This is the reason why the Fed tries to keep really tight in tight parallel to where the market's going by itself. The reason why they do that is because they don't want the market telling them what to do. They want to seem like they're in control, because then if inflation is still hot, if they get to, let's say that the yields stay here right at 3.1 and they don't move at all, which is not going to happen, but let's say that happens. When the Fed tightens to the point that they get to 3.1, they have a decision to make, and that's not going to be, do we need to keep tightening in order to keep inflation under control? Their decision at that point will be instead, do we surprise the market in a negative way and purposely crash it? Even knowing that we're the ones who are going to get blamed for this because the market's already told us what they expect. That they try to keep tight conjunction with it because they don't want the market to set a clear expectation for them. They want to be setting the expectation. They want to be perceived to be setting the expectation.
Well, I just want to add, getting back to Captain Latte's question over here, the bonds, U.S. Treasury bonds are future dollars. So you were right to think, okay, is cash preferable or not? The reason that rates drop low is because the future expectation by people who buy bonds is deflation. So as soon as things flip and it looks like there's going to be inflation, they demand a higher yield before they purchase the bond, right, to help cover some of that inflationary exposure. So Sam's a little more.
Thank you, Nate. I'm getting into the weeds, but Nate is explaining this much clearer. So please continue, Nate.
Yeah. I was going to say, Sam's slightly more skeptical about the Fed than I am. The thing that happened on this one is and this is why it's connected to oil and energy costs. And so Sam's second chart was really critical. Since oil has been the overwhelming driver of inflation since the summer of 2021, as long as oil prices continue to go up, the expectation that inflation will persist goes up, which means people demand higher yields. But to Sam's point, if we're now in a situation where oil prices start to normalize, like normalizing will feel like they went down. That was his earlier point, which I liked. So if they just go flat for a while and they stop moving up, that means that the yields will start to come down because now the expectation is, the inflation has started to abate and go the other direction. And I think that's what I think about this.
Yeah, but that's gonna create a situation for the Fed where they're gonna have to make a U-turn. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Okay. And then this is the part where I have a hard time because it just depends. The Fed in particular has a goofy situation where they're supposed to do two things. They're supposed to maintain high or full employment and price stability at the same time. And they're going to be in a situation where they may not be able to do both. And then on top of that, there's a chance, what happens if there's another oil shock? Like imagine a situation where something goofy happens and the Iranians sink a Saudi tanker, right? Like the system is so fragile. We've already seen a shock from the Russian side of things has sort of thrown everybody into a tizzy. Although if we look at Sam's chart, it started even before that, right? But like we were just really fragile on the liquid energy side. And so if something else were to happen, I mean, the whole situation could get way out of hand, right? Because poor CPI would look like it's going off the charts. even though everywhere else except for energy there's deflation. There might be inflation in one area, and it's just because of a supply shock. So I need to see how things play out a little bit more before I make a call. I will say though that Sam has to be right. The Fed probably roasted. No, they raised rates faster yesterday than they had signaled, and I think it's because they're setting up for a reversal. And the more they raise now, the more they can reverse in the future and try to save markets. I don't know if they're going to try to crash them on purpose, like Sam is saying, but they can try
they're
to.
not going to.
We've got more tools. We've got more tools now to save everything.
Yes, exactly, and that's exactly my point. Is that they're going to be in a position where if they continue to raise rates at a certain point, the market will have already set an expectation for them, saying if you raise beyond this point, you're going to surprise us.
Interesting.
Which means that they will be crashing the market on purpose. So they can't. I'm saying they're going to have to reverse when they get to that.
Yeah.
And that, because people are silly and they think that the Federal Reserve is actually in control of this, when the Federal Reserve switches from tightening to easing, that's going to cause the market
Create the comeback narrative for Biden.
Exactly. That's going to create the comeback narrative because we won't be in a point where the economy is in actual recession yet, and markets will be going crazy. And what's happening? So this is my theory on what's happening right now is that I don't know if you guys ever saw during 2020 and 2021 all these like money printer go burr narratives.
Of course.
Right. So all those memes, like before that moment, nobody really had any concept in the public of what the Federal Reserve does or is or what they do, right? And that was the first moment that many people, not most people, but I still think that most people don't know what the Federal Reserve does, but that many people started learning about the Federal Reserve. That was an entry point for them. And so they think that the Federal Reserve, A, prints a lot of money, B, causes inflation when they do so, and C, was acting out of control. And market insiders, who are actual traders in the market, are like skeptical of government action by nature as like uber capitalists.
Can confirm they're libertarian hacks.
Right. And they probably had an instinct to agree with that. And then also they are swimming in all these memes all the time anyway. And so at that point they're thinking the public is waking up, and I agree with the public. The Fed is lost control. And so when you get market insiders losing control, I think all of the market trading this year has really been, what's actually been happening is that market insiders are testing the resolve of the Federal Reserve. They're saying, you guys have been weak in the knees, weak-willed, always willing to be dovish, and it's caused inflation, and now we're in inflation, and we want to see whether when you guys are actually talking about raising rates, are you actually going to do it? The market crashes. We're crashing the market. Are you gonna throw in the towel and stop raising rates, or are you gonna actually tackle inflation? And so, what Powell's been doing is just talking tough and following through on their plan. And so, little by little, what the Federal Reserve is doing right now is regaining the confidence of, the general trader, even market insiders who want to believe, okay, the Fed has now got this under control. And so the problem is that when they get this under control and the market starts believing them, first of all, they're wrong, because the Fed actually isn't in control of anything. It's all just an illusion of power. But and that's my opinion. That maybe you don't agree with me, but that's what I think. And beyond that, that's the point at which, once they've regained the confidence of market participants, they can start easing again. And so right now, everybody's worried about inflation, but we're going to reach a certain point toward later this year. Maybe it's the end of this year, maybe it's fall. I don't know when it's going to be, when we actually are staring down the barrel of recession, and people are going to be worried less about inflation than deflation. Like we're not going to be worried. We're not going to have a lot of inflation narrative in the press anymore. We're going to have a lot of are we headed for recession narrative, and that's the point at which market participants will be ready to hear the Fed say we're going to start easing again, and they won't flip out and say you guys are money printing, because they'll be nervous in the other direction. So the Fed it just needs to wait for everybody for a market sentiment to get nervous in the other direction, and then when they start to ease, that will make market participants feel confident. That will lead to a giant upswing in the markets, which will probably end in disaster, by the way, I think. But yeah.
Can I pull us to a topic that I really want to get to, because we've got some foreign policy, and hopefully Ty is back at some point and hears us talking about Iran. So, can Iran be an agent for recovery for the West? Can we reconcile the JCPOA? Can we get that Iranian oil, or are they going to be addicted to the ruble?
Yeah, before I opine on that, I just want to say that it's still relevant, because even in Powell's comments yesterday, he made it really clear that he's limited and the Fed is limited sort of inside of the sandbox of energy, right? So unless we can, if we as a society can grow the sandbox so that we don't have these supply issues anymore, then our options of what we can do inside the sandbox grow. And so this is exactly the right kind of question. It's like, okay, well, hold on a minute. Where are places we can go to normalize relations and do other things to try to get more liquid energy online? Because this is where we're fragile. We need to shore those things up. So to your point, my immediate reaction is yes, but right. The concern is the U.S. could absolutely go in and tell the Iranians, hey, we need you. We're going to cut a deal. We're going to talk tough in public. A lot of finger wagging. But behind closed doors, we're going to cut a deal. Let's make this thing happen. The problem, and Ty could speak to this more, but the only problem with that is as the Iranians start to win, right? They get some momentum, they get some economic stuff going on, things start going well. Their number one enemy is Saudi Arabia, who's also
that's
a huge.
That's what I was going to bring up. That's just what I was going to bring up. So you right? That's a huge problem.
Yeah, and I just don't know. The dynamics on that become extremely complicated. And so then you kind of have to decide, are you team Persia or are you team Arabia? Or are you team Turkey, right? Turkey, that's the other thing, is that's the third bad boy in the region. Right. The Turks could go ahead and say, you know what? We decide we actually really like Kurdistan is ours again. There's a bunch of oil fields in northern Iraq. We're just going to go in and just like, I mean, who is going to stop them if they decided to make a move like that? And so I think as Americans, it would behoove us to think about these exact issues and say, well, in a situation where we're not the police of the Middle East, how do we see them making peace amongst themselves? And if we can get Iran back online, it's like sticking a finger in the Saudis' eye, and they're going to be pissed. And so if they shoot at each other even for 2 seconds, the Suez Canal shuts down, and a third of the liquid production for the planet just goes offline, even for a week. It doesn't matter. That's going to be starvation for like a quarter of the planet. And so to answer your question, it absolutely needs to be considered. It's such a delicate dance. That's way above my pay grade. I have no idea. But your mind is exactly in the right place, where it's like, okay, how can we bring more safe production online, especially if we can be environmentally smarter this time around, right?
And let me just go through my expertise, because I do have a hard out in 20 minutes, maybe sooner. So probably 20 minutes. If
hard out whenever you want. We're not sticklers that way.
If it was geopolitically viable, here's how it would work. Iran has over-enriched. They have gone way past what we wanted them to do, which is like, 4.75, 5.0% U-238. U-232. The rest is U-238. They went all the way up to the edge of what is the danger zone, which is like 20%. Guess what? For these new nuclear reactors, we want 20%. Guess what? The only source of HEU, highly enriched uranium, 20% 252, 20% 252 has been the source is Russia. And we've got an embargo with Russia. We need to develop new sources, either American, Canadian, whoever enriches it. They need to be a trustworthy partner. And wouldn't it be nice if Iran had a long-term motivation for stability, had a long-term motivation to be a better actor locally and globally? And I think this could do it. It could be a permanent deal that lets them, maybe we say, okay, the JCPOA is too restrictive. We are going to let you enrich up to 20% for these specific purposes, and that it is, as long as you're cooperating with the IAEA, as long as all this is happening, we're going to be super strict. But yes, you can have your medical research, you can have your HEU reactors, as long as we know exactly what's going on. And that's exactly what the IAEA is supposed to do. So I think it can work.
Yeah.
And they can do it as long as Israeli missiles aren't being thrown into the side of buildings and blowing up the cameras.
Again, so this is part of the problem, is that the Israelis seem to be Team Arabia inside of that fight I just mentioned.
Right.
Which is like shocking, right? Like, just if you looked at the history of the thing, that would just seem totally absurd. But it does appear that Israel is Team Arabia. They're not Team Persia, and they're not Team Turk. So it's like, all right. I mean, so you're exactly right. The Israelis can derail this thing in 2 seconds unilaterally, and it's a disaster. So if we were just going to talk real life, like what should be some strong strategies moving forward, we absolutely need to talk with our Canadian partners and say, look, we have to go find every bit of material that's going to help us with energy, and we're going to do it here. So if they've got uranium, plutonium, whatever, we're going to get to it, even if it's costly.
Well, it's not in the material. The material's everywhere, and Canada and Australia have the richest deposits, the easiest to access deposits, other than Kazakhstan. I think. I think it's Kazakhstan, which basically uranium is sitting in the sand, and so that's why they're the number one exporter, I think, or close to it. And so really the question is not the availability, because we've got our own, and we've got our low level cheap enrichment, but we don't have enough enrichment to really bring these new experimental reactors online. We're talking the fast breeder reactors that are going in Wyoming. Those need the 20%, the HEU. At least for the first run of material.
I wouldn't put my hopes in Iran. It's just too hard, I think. But it's absolutely partnership with Canada, and I think an entire energy strategy between Mexico, the U.S., and Canada to become the backbone of energy production for the planet should probably be the goal. I mean, if we're being serious and trying to get things done, NAFTA or whatever we call it now. The NAFTA zone needs to be the leaders on all of the energy stuff.
Yeah.
Fracking. All the nat gas we should be on the edge of that stuff. We should be on the edge of the nuclear, anything. I mean, solar, you name it.
I think we're on the edge of all of it, aren't we? Except for probably nuclear.
We don't build solar. We sell solar here.
Right.
We don't.
We're really good at consuming solar. We're not so great at producing it ourselves. But That's my point. I think if we're talking about the sandbox, which is the sandbox of what's possible for policymakers, ultimately, it's the base. Right, having a surplus of energy is the basis for trying to create a better society. That might be a little bit of a strong statement, but man, that's
true. That's correct. Yeah.
So so I think all people, left, right, and center, should say, how can we create a more ethical, secure, abundant energy base? That should be priority number one for everybody. And then, as we get that right, we can help go make the world a better place. If we're going to try to do partnerships abroad, the geopolitics gets so crazy so fast. I mean, what did the end is just the beginning drop today or yesterday or something like that, right? I haven't gotten Peter Zion's newest book, but I'm sure it's just going to be a huge doomer scenario. The world cannot get along. Right. We're going to be killing each other.
Well, right, and most importantly, if you're talking about American prestige and power, and you're like you want America to be powerful, that it's like. It's the easiest and best way to make sure that everybody wants to be our friend, and like if we are producing the cheapest, best energy in the world and supplying it to everyone,
and cleanest, I have no problem saying the cleanest,
and we control both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, we're just like an invincible dreadnought. Like, what are you gonna do against the United States? Nothing. We're just so incredibly powerful in that position that there's
that's a great populist nationalist message. Go pitch that to your Democratic friends. But
they're not thinking about this right now. They're not thinking.
No, I know, and it's a tragedy because to my way of thinking, my hope would be that this moment that we're having is so painful for Democrats that it causes a little bit of inter-party change.
But look, the way that specifically Democrats, but a lot of people think about this, including some like Constitution-minded Republicans, is they think that the base level of everything that makes everything possible is the like body politic, civil society,
that's
constitution, right? And then everything else is built on top of that. So they're thinking our highest priority is dealing with all these dissidents and all the infighting, and we need to protect democracy. And as long as democracy is safe, everything else is going to take care of itself, right? That's
magically.
But that's what they believe.
Yeah.
And if you talk to people who work in government, that's what they think. But that's not true.
Yeah, that needs to be. I mean, I don't know. I almost am rooting for another oil shock so that everything just goes totally to crap and we have like a serious issue.
Oh, it'll happen sooner or later.
The basis of organized society is abundant energy. And then from there, we can figure out justice and equality and everything else. That's like a third order, block on the tower of society. Once you've got that energy base, then you can work on the food base. And once you have those two things in, then you can start, you know what I mean? Like, anyway, I just feel strongly.
Are you a fan of
I'm going to give everybody an opportunity for a hard out. Sorry, Ty. I know I'm taking over your show. I still love you. I'm Nate Dallin. I don't do anything yet. I'm still thinking about making a podcast. We'll see. I love you all. You're all the best. Soy Latte, or Soy Yaddle. I don't know how to say your name. Soy Boy, we're gonna talk about these issues more in depth. This has caused me to generate a new list of questions for another day, so I'm excited for it. Sam, as always, you're a beautiful human. We'll talk to you later.
Take care.
Wow, that was fast. All right. He's out of here quick when he.
So let me let me wrap up. My name is Carl. I'm Soyaddle. That's Seattle without the C and stick some soy in it. I call myself an anarcho-Bidenist, and I almost believe it because, we live in on the principles of anarchy. We are minarchist. We decide our own rules. Everything is local. But, Joe Biden's the best option in these terrible times. And that hurts, but I'm going to deal with it, and I'm going to make the best out of it. And some hierarchies eventually are temporarily justifiable. So here we are. I talk about energy on Saturday mornings, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. I have a wonderful podcast video live stream with my friend Gabe Ignetti, and we are the Eco-Modernist Society of North America. We are organizing and speaking to so many brilliant people, so many actual leaders in their fields. I am shocked and amazed at the access that we're getting these days. I spoke to Lake Barrett about the terrible misrepresentation that Netflix gave him in the Meltdown 3 Mile Island series. We have spoken to amazing people about synthetic fuels, nuclear energy. We're hopefully going to speak with people about GMO and modern agriculture. We're going to talk to people about modern medicine and gene editing and vaccines one of these days. This is what it means to be an eco-modernist. Oh, and just the other day, we talked to Jeff Speck, who wrote Walkable City and Walkable City Rules, where you can find the policy answers for how to defeat the car. Amazing stuff. Come check us out Saturday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern.
All right, Sam, you got anything for yourself?
Yeah, I'm starting a new project actually. It's called Progressive Victory, and the goal is to elect progressive Democrats in 2022. And we've got a Twitch channel that I'm just starting where I'm interviewing my political professional friends, talking about sort of an insider's view of what's happening in the Democratic Party and in the Capitol. And you can find us at twitch.tv/progressive victory. And we're going to be doing that interview series, but it's all in service of a much larger effort to organize people in Twitch politics to help elect progressive Democrats who share the values of Twitch politics, lefty Twitch streamers to win and eventually build power for the Twitch politics community, so that this is a place where content creators can be the tip of your spear as audience members and force your agenda onto the agendas of the elected leaders who represent you. And you can, if you go to twitch.tv/progressive victory, you can see some of the videos that we've got there and find a link to our Discord where we're going to be doing that organizing work.
All right. Last but not least, my name is Tiberius D, and this has been the conversation. We talked a lot about energy today. I didn't actually participate at all, which is actually kind of amazing. But there was so much going on, and I was dealing with some stuff on the side as well. So all I want to do is I want to appreciate all the wonderful people who came here. I had stuff to add, but don't worry, because that was plenty of content as it was. So I hope you all enjoyed that one. And if you want me to fight on the next one, I do apologize, but sometimes I let the smart people talk because these guys really do bring their own weight, and I don't need to add anything. Without further ado, we're going to catch you guys next time. See you later.
All right.
All right. Appreciate you all being here.
Yep. I've only got a couple people watching. Where am I going to rate us to? Let's find out. I'm still streaming, and I'm gonna out.
Just rating Connor.
Am I not following Connor?
Counterpoints, yeah. All right, I gotta get out of here. You guys have a good one.
See ya.
Have a good night.
One moment, still streaming.
Yeah.
Oh, how am I not following Counterpoints? He is here. It's just not recommended. Well, he's just not on my list. Okay, go on to commercial.
I want to speak to you about a new organization called the Eco-Modernist Society of North America. I'm here because we are in the midst of a potentially monumental ecological crisis. It is only through a new environmentalism 2.0 that progress can be made. We believe that our only hope for human advancement and even human survival is through the exponential advance of science in the service of humanity. Eco-modernism is a new environmental paradigm which looks to reverse the fear of nuclear power and scientific progress in general. Ecology-based modernism is the most direct way to define it. Eco-modernism as a philosophy is described in the Eco-Modernist Manifesto. We believe humanity should not be rejecting technological progress, but rather, technology imply that we just need to sit back and let things take care of themselves. To the contrary, we believe that humanity is at a crossroads that severely threatens our future on this planet. I hope by now you understand the worthiness of our cause. Eco-modernism is really only a philosophy at this time. I want to talk to you about the necessity of turning it into a movement, which will be part of the larger environmentalist movement. For it is only through our presence and participation that there can be any hope of moving environmentalism in the right direction. Our aim is not to divide the environmental movement, but rather to multiply its numbers with the incorporation of many scientific and educational communities that is working to both build chapters of eco-modernist societies and support our growth worldwide.